If you're watching this on Legacy of Survival, remember to subscribe right now, because this channel exists for people who want the real story behind the practical wisdom our grandparents lived by. Before we dive in, let's start with something that sets the tone for everything you're about to hear. During the Second World War, the average family wasn't thinking in terms of prepping or stockpiling as a hobby. They were doing it to stay alive in a world where supply chains were shattered, ration books were thin, and the future was something you couldn't take for granted. They learned what lasted, what spoiled, and what could carry a household through months of uncertainty. Today, the world is obviously different, but the principles they live by remain incredibly valuable. So, as you listen, think about how these foods weren't just items on a shelf. They were part of a survival system honed under pressure and perfected by necessity. The first food worth talking about is dried beans, one of the most dependable staples Second World War families relied on. Beans were inexpensive, widely accessible, and capable of lasting for years when kept in airtight containers. Families stored them in metal tins, cloth sacks, or sealed jars, whatever they had. The real value wasn't just longevity, but versatility. Today, they still serve the same purpose: high protein, filling, and endlessly adaptable. If you wanted to apply the same approach now, the modern equivalent would be storing them in mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, a method that brings their shelf life well beyond the decade mark. Another essential food was flour, particularly whole wheat or rye, although white flour often lasted longer because of its lower oil content. Second World War households stocked it in large quantities because it allowed them to bake their own bread when store shelves went bare. But flour had a drawback. It could attract pests if not stored well. Housewives often froze flour briefly before storage to kill weevils, then sealed it tight. Today, the principle is the same. Long-term storage flour is still dependable, and adding airtight containers or using sealed buckets keeps it viable for years. Applying this in daily life can be as simple as rotating through your supply. Use one container each month and replace it immediately. Canned meat deserves its own discussion because it's one of the few protein sources that truly stood the test of time. Wartime families relied heavily on corned beef, spam-like products, and tinned fish. These cans often sat for years in pantries and remained perfectly edible. What made canned meat important was its ability to provide dense calories and fats during shortages. Modern prepper shelves still feature canned tuna, chicken, or luncheon meats for the same reasons. The practical takeaway is straightforward. Buy extra during sales, label with dates, and keep a simple rotation system so nothing goes to waste while maintaining a deep reserve. Sugar might surprise some people, but it was one of the most precious wartime foods. When rationing hit, families who already had sugar stored were in a much better position. Not only did sugar preserve well, but it also allowed families to make jams, baked goods, and fermentation recipes. Sugar is essentially shelf-stable forever if kept dry. In a modern context, sugar can serve the same multi-purpose role: food preservation, morale-boosting treats, and fermentation for vinegar or kombucha. A practical application is storing it in heavy-duty containers that protect it from moisture, then using it liberally for canning seasonal fruit. Another hero of World War II storage was powdered milk. During the war, fresh milk was inconsistent at best, and powdered milk ensured families could still cook, bake, and provide children with essential nutrients. It's stored beautifully in sealed tins or jars. Today, powdered milk still works the same way, especially the non-fat variety, which has a significantly longer shelf life. It can be used in baking, emergency meal kits, or any scenario where refrigeration isn't an option. One actionable method is portioning powdered milk into weekly used jars, so you're never opening a large container unnecessarily. Root vegetables such as potatoes, carrots and onions were staples not because they were stored in jars, but because they could last months when kept in cool, dark cellars. Families built makeshift root cellars or buried barrels in the ground to maintain consistent temperature and humidity. This natural method required no electricity and kept vegetables edible deep into winter. Applying this today doesn't require a full cellar. Anyone with a garage crawl space or even insulated bins can replicate the principle. Stable temperature, low light, and controlled moisture. Salt was another cornerstone of wartime storage because it enabled long-term preservation of meat and vegetables. Salt itself never spoils, so families bought it whenever available and used it sparingly but effectively. For modern survivalists, salt performs the same role, curing meats, fermenting foods, and maintaining electrolyte balance. A practical way to integrate this today is keeping multiple types of salt, coarse for curing, fine for cooking, and iodized for everyday nutrition. Finally, hardtack and other hard biscuits were still common in the early 20th century. Families baked them in large batches, knowing they could last for years if dried properly. Hardtack wasn't glamorous, but it delivered calories when nothing else was available. Anyone today can bake a modern version by mixing flour, water and salt, then drying it at low heat. Stored in airtight containers, it lasts essentially forever and gives you a literal historical survival food in your pantry. If you found this breakdown useful and want more content rooted in real history and real survival practices, make sure you subscribe to the channel and share this guide with anyone who appreciates knowledge that stands the test of time.